Okay, we'll go ahead and begin. I'm Russell Shirey, and it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ralph Giffin and Dr. Carlo Lipizzi from Stevens Institute of Technology. And today in this session, they will be presenting updates regarding their research task labeled WRT-1018, and it's titled DAU for Defense Acquisition University Credential Development. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Giffin.
Thank you very much, and welcome. And we'll try to get through this so that everybody can make their virtual happy hour. As said, this is a WRT-1018 DAU credential development. What we're going to do is talk a little bit about the research team sponsor's background, introduce the task. Within that task, we were tasked to do some interviews. We're going to talk about the interviews and interview results. My colleague, Dr. Lipizzi, will show you some of the data analysis that we did coming out of those interviews. We're going to show you, introduce to you the current version of the competency frameworks that came out of this research. We'll talk about knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors, which was a task that was added to this research once we began. We'll talk a little bit about an education and training market survey we did of sources for those items for the DAU. Finally, mentoring and webinars, and then work to be accomplished. So this is the research team, and you can see the co-PIs, also our subject matter experts, Nicole Hutchinson for digital engineering. She also serves as the PI for the 10006 Digital Engineering Competency Framework, which is an important liaison and connection to that work, since, as I'll show you later, we are connected, trying to make sure that we are connected tightly to that work that's being done so that we have consistency in the framework. Carlo Lipizzi, who you'll hear from a little bit later, is our data scientist and data analytics subject matter expert. Greg Cassander, who is not with us today, but is our subject matter expert in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then John Wade, who previous to Nicole joining us was our subject matter expert in digital engineering, and also was the PI for 10006, the digital engineering framework research task that we're tied to. He left Stevens and is now at University of California at San Diego. And then up in the upper right, you see our research graduate researchers, Fernanda, Daniel, and Deep. And then I'll show you where our undergraduate students, one of the nice things about being at Stevens is we have a lot of really sharp undergraduate students, and they helped us with our education sources survey. Here's our sponsors, John Snardley and Dave Pearson from the Defense Acquisition University in Fort Belvoir. This is a chart, you may have seen it before, especially if you were in the Digital Engineering Competency Framework 10006 briefing that Nicole did. This slide is taken from the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, Digital Engineering Strategy slide deck. And basically it's showing that the DoD is very focused on transforming their workforce to support digital engineering. And where we pick up this is in the DAU's interest in developing training mechanisms and in these areas. So given the evolving technologies related to these three areas, and I'm going to call these three areas, I'm going to use the same term that DAU uses. They call each of these an area of strategic interest. So the first area of strategic interest is data analytics. The second one was artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the third being evolving engineering practices related to DE or digital engineering. So DAU, given where the DoD is headed, wanted to make sure that they understood what the current capability of their workforce is, what that needs to be, understand those gaps in these three areas of strategic interest, and then explore the development of a program to provide micro-credentials to their acquisition workforce in these areas. So the task that we had four items. One was to identify what an acquisition professional should reasonably know about each ASI, and they asked us to conduct some interviews and to interview a broad set of folks within different areas within the DoD. And they asked us to take the information that we were able to gain from those interviews and deliver back in the form of competency frameworks for each of these ASIs. And again, I'm gonna use the term ASI, area of strategic interest. Number two is once the competencies were synthesized, to conduct a market survey to identify some sources across the United States of training and education that are focused in these areas. And then to develop and host some webinars for the DoD in these areas. And we ended up doing that across each one of the ASIs. We will show you here in a few minutes that we delivered 3 webinars in each of these areas of strategic interest, importance. And then finally, to provide mentoring and coaching to the selected faculty at DAU as they are developing the curriculum for these micro-credentials, as well as during their piloting session, and providing serving as a resource to the faculty as well as some of the students in the pilot sessions. Now, once we got started, we had one update, other than the fact that they asked us to extend the task to better meet their schedule for curriculum development. We did that, but also they asked us to trade off some work, and they asked us to eliminate the market survey of the sources of education and training in these areas, and instead to take our framework and to drill down a little bit deeper and provide some knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors for each of the competencies. Now, as I'll show you a little bit later in this presentation, we did this. We added this KSAB, or knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors task, but we also provided also the market survey. We completed that market survey, and we did deliver them a preliminary that had the sources, and I'll share some of the outcomes of that. So this is basically the resulting search tasks from my last chart, a couple charts ago, where we added KSABs in our work tasks. So the interviews, the initial effort that we focused on early in this research was to do what we consider to be a pretty exhaustive literature review to develop key terms, not only for use in the interviews that we were going to conduct, but also in our market survey. These also helped provide and inform our frameworks. The interviews captured the current knowledge and mindset and skill set within the DoD. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you some examples of the templates that we use. They were one-on-one interviews during the lockdown and during our era of COVID-19. We did these all via virtual. And each one of our members of our team participated in these. We asked them to not only validate subjects that we had provided within the ASIs or our subcategories that we came up with and validate those. They also helped inform some changes that we made, but also wanted to understand their awareness of the subjects that we were looking at and what they believed the relative importance to the DoD and to their specific to their mission within DoD were of these subjects. And finally, we performed analytics on these the interview transcripts to provide additional insights. As an example of the types of organizations we looked at, this is a subset of the organizations at the top of this chart. You can see that we spoke across a broad core of the DoD. We talked to Air Force, we talked to Office of Secretary of Defense, we talked to folks in Logistics Data Analysis Center, DAU, Naval Warfare Center, and as you can see, some of these other organizations that we talked to, but you also see the MITRE Corporation there. So we talked to FFRDC representatives just to make sure that we were covering a broad set of inputs in these interviews. And then the types of folks we spoke to on the bottom, you see a subset of represented titles. I think what's most important here to share is that we spoke with folks that were everybody from kind of entry-level junior folks that have been on the job for maybe 2-3 years, all the way through very senior folks, senior technical folks, and we also spoke to managers. So we think we caught a pretty good cross-section of folks within these interviews. So the first thing that we asked folks in the interview was to briefly describe their background, education level, and years of experience. We wanted to understand their organization, the mission of their organization, what their role was in the organization, what their span of influence was, the types of folks that they spoke to anybody that they directed work for, and And then finally, we asked them if they considered themselves to be technical, non-technical, or kind of a hybrid between technical and non-technical. Then we asked them in their own words, and again, to describe each one of the 3 ASIs individually. So we asked them, in your own words, describe digital engineering. In your own words, describe artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in your own words, describe data analytics, just to get an idea of what their basic knowledge was within these 3 areas. We asked them if they use these approaches from these areas in their work, and to provide us some examples. And some of these discussions got quite lengthy and pretty detailed. So again, the transcripts really helped us. And then how does the organization as a whole use these, and again, provide examples. So not only within their work, but then across their organization. Then what we asked them, what they think are the most common skill sets within the current workforce that they see within these areas. And then when they look for folks to join their teams, we ask them what critical skills are they looking for in these areas, and why those skills that they are looking for in these areas are important. Now at the bottom you see kind of a beginning of where we started laying out our subcategories within each of these 3 areas, the digital engineering, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics. And so what we did within these items, these subcategories actually fed into our framework. But what we asked the interview candidates specifically was, we went to each one of these subcategories and asked them if the current DoD workforce knowledge that they're aware of is about right in these areas. Does it need improvement, or is it not critical or important? And again, this was another interesting part of the interview where we really got some good discussion on what they thought was needed versus what may not be needed or may not be important. And then finally in the interview, we asked them what their specific gaps. So this is the first time we turned the lens onto them and said, based on gaps you may have in your own knowledge, what would you like to address? And would you and your team or your team be interested in training in these areas? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlo, and he's going to talk about the analytics that were performed on our transcripts.
Thank you, Ralph. So as Ralph was mentioning, what we did was collecting the transcripts from the interviews, and then we aggregated all the text to have some analytics on what they say, just to be sure that we didn't miss anything. In a couple of my research projects, I'm working on natural language processing, and I used some of the tools that I developed there to analyze the scripts, the transcripts that we collected in this case. Initially, we wanted to do one single analysis, but then we realized that the differences were pretty substantial. And we decided to keep the 3 different points of view, the DAU, the FF RDC, the DoD practitioner, and then do the aggregated point of view. So the one that you have on your screen is the analysis of the DAU point of view. We did 2 types of analysis for the 3 categories, 3+1 categories. One is the plain word cloud that is based on the frequency of the words. It's kind of an indication of what is more recurrent somehow in the conversation. And then we did, we created a network within the words just to extract the main topics. So those are kind of saying the same thing in different ways. The network is more in detail, but for each one, we created the interpretation, the narrative that in this case you see on the left side in the gray box. So from the DAU point of view, the focus is on training, as you can imagine, is on data science and analytics, that seems to be for DAU the most critical point. Then we realized that one of the reasons is because it's the first topic they are addressing. And then obviously DAU cost evaluation, distance learning is obviously one of the things that appear the most. If we can go to the next one. Here we have a more technical stress on some of the aspects. So we have still a general concern on training for the workforce. We have a more emphasis on the understanding and implementation of technical aspects. There is more machine learning, more data engineering, more software. There is interest in research and algorithm. And on the right side, that was quite interesting. There is a perception that has a lot of ground that data science can not only improve the performance, but also it can connect aspects of the entire structure and organization. In the next chart, that is the DoD practitioner. Again, you have a little bit more of the technical aspects. So you have interest on learning more about data and analytics in particular, most likely because they see it as something that is an immediate need because they have data and they want to get some sense out of it. Importance of expanding knowledge of software, machine learning as a way to do better their job. In the next and final one is an aggregate representation, data engineering. So again, big stress on data, but at the very end, that makes a lot of sense because digital engineering, digital means data. Data analytics is data. Machine learning without data wouldn't be that much. So big stress on data, obviously big stress of engineering in a broad sense and associated with data. Learning and training was also pretty relevant. So that's our analytics on the transcripts. Now, back to you.
Thank you, Carlo.
Thank you.
So the next chart shows our current version of our framework. And again, I mentioned 10006 earlier, the Digital Engineering Competency Framework. That was a key set of research. And we took the version that they had from their framework and we launched ours based on that. So we wanted to have some consistency and continuity between what they were doing and what we were doing. Now that again has changed since we've used this, so there will be an update that will need to be done once they deliver their final framework. But suffice it to say that at the time that we delivered our initial draft framework, you can see on the left there what their framework looked like, and then across the right you can see for each one of the other two areas, artificial intelligence, machine learning. You can see how we mapped some of the areas that were very important and critical knowledge areas across that area and competency. And then for data analytics, you can see what we've done over there. And you also get an idea that in this framework, when it comes to modeling and data engineering and software literacy, both data analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning share the same types of competencies that are needed across these two areas. So there's a lot of overlap between those two. And then finally, on the bottom, digital literacy. Basically, we call that a prerequisite for both of these two items. As I had mentioned, the DAU asked us to drill down and provide some KSABs, knowledge, skills, abilities, and behaviors for each of these areas. And so what we did was we started with again 10006 They had several hundred KSABs that they had developed within their initial research for their framework. We leveraged 74 of those that we used. Again, I should also mention that we did these in two categories. We did them for practitioners and we did them for managers. And so we kind of had that basic intermediate for practitioners. And then for managers, we had a combination of awareness and basic. But we leveraged 74 of those KSABs from the work that they did over in the Digital Engineering Competency Framework research task. For artificial intelligence and machine learning, we developed 48 unique KSABs and about a quarter of the total. And then finally, for data analytics, there were 62. And as you can imagine, there's some overlap also, some KSABs between AI, ML, and data analytics. For our education, training, and market survey, our undergraduate students really did a great job and spent a lot of time on this. Even though the deliverable was eliminated, we found 489 resources. A lot of work was done here, and so we delivered that and provided that to the DAU. We thought it was important. It's also already been used by colleagues of ours within the university in the development of some of their curriculum and some of their programs. So this has already come to some good use. You can see the source categories that we found. So the categories that we had were the massive open online courses, or the MOOCs, like Coursera, edX. We also, one category was traditional university courses that were available online. We found a lot of good university courses that were out there, but one of our criteria is that they are available online. We looked at books, category of articles, a category of podcasts, and finally videos sourced via YouTube. And many of these videos that we found aren't necessarily standalone as far as education and training, but they're nice components of an education and training curriculum that you'd want to put together that just enhance that final product. And as you can see, about 43% of what we found or 213 MOOCs. The university courses, another quarter of everything we found were courses, and that's 128, 34 articles, 9 books, 3 podcasts, and finally 102 videos. As far as the mentoring, so this was another aspect of what we were asked to do, was to mentor DAU faculty during their curriculum development as well as pilot course instruction. What we've also done since we started this is to expand that to include office hours during their piloting of their courses. And we are underway with that currently in data analytics and AI, ML, and digital engineering will be happening here soon, and we will be doing the same level of mentoring for those two as we're doing right now for data analytics. I mentioned the webinars earlier on. This was another area that we were asked to provide 9 webinars. What we decided to do was 3 in each one of our areas of strategic importance. And the framework that we put together for these webinars, the first webinar for each area was going to be a introduction to that topic. So for digital engineering, that first one was really an introduction to digital engineering. The next one, the framework we used across all 3 of these areas was what's the current state look like? Current state being, current research that's being done that we can share with the audience within the DoD, for instance, or case studies that we could find. So what are the current, and in the case of digital readiness, it was the drivers and challenges and opportunities of the current in the current environment that we're in now. And then for each one of these areas, for the third webinar, we actually looked at what the future looks like. Let's look over the horizon. What's going to be happening? What's going to come down? What are we seeing right now are going to be the challenges in the future? So again, each one of the webinars were organized in an introduction, a current state, and a future state. And so you can see here for digital engineering, quite a bit of attendance there for the first one, but still pretty good attendance for the last 2 there. And these were done in July. They were followed by 3 webinars in data analytics that were, and by the way, back to John Wade, Troy Peterson, and Mark Blackburn delivered these, and then Dr. Lipizzi delivered the next 3 in digital engineering or data analytics in July and August, and then finally Greg Fassander delivered 3 in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So again, those were pretty well participated in. Work to be accomplished. So we have some continuation of mentoring and data analytics and digital engineering, artificial intelligence, machine learning to be scheduled. So that's work that we're going to continue. As I mentioned, we are tying our frameworks to the digital engineering competency framework. And so once that framework is released, the final release, we are going to go back and reorganize and update our frameworks so that they map and that we leave with consistency across these frameworks. And then finally, final report. And that concludes, and I don't know if there's any questions, but I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing at this point.
Right. Excellent presentation by the both of you. It's nice to see, as you said, you know, forget what your specific word was, but those game-changing technologies being integrated into the DAU education ecosystem. It's really important to, you know, keep those up to date and ensure that what we're training on is the latest and greatest for systems engineering. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A tab, and Mr. Giffin and Dr. Lipizzi will be on for the next about 10 minutes, available to answer any questions anybody has.
People may be lined up for sandwiches downstairs.
I'll start it off. I'll break the ice. So I've done a lot of DAU courses in my Air Force career thus far, and I've found the ones that kind of have simulations and you know, actual projects help kind of reinforce the principles. I saw that you've done a couple talks already, but do you anticipate that kind of simulations and project-based exercises will be part of the you know, curriculum as you push it forward for the credentials, or is it going to be more you know, maybe like a higher level just awareness of these different topics?
And I'll, you know, let Carlo answer too, but so our view of this is, you know, DAU is really the focused area. You know, they're the ones that are developing this curriculum. One of the reasons that we wanted to deliver our survey of sources of courses is that there are things like articles and videos and things, because we're, you know, at Stevens, we're very hands-on oriented when it comes to education. That's one of the best ways to learn. So we wanted to provide as many things, as many resources to the DAU as we possibly could, so that they have that option. But that's really going to be something that it's going to be up to them. Carlo, did you have anything you wanted to?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, modeling simulation somehow will go across the 3 areas of interest. There is a little bit of modeling and simulation when you do digital engineering, because you need to have, why you do the digital engineering, because you want to get data to do something, and before doing something, most likely you need to model the reality before actually doing it. For sure, will be in the data analytics and AI machine learning. I mean, if you think for a second, AI is a form of modeling. It's not the traditional modeling, and the same thing for data science. It's bottom up, but the very end is a representation of the reality. It's not the reality, but it's doing something that humans may do in reality, meaning that is modeling a behavior and then eventually enforcing and using the behavior to do things. But we do not have the visibility on the specific building blocks of the credentials that they want to develop. I have a little bit of visibility, have some visibility on the data analytics portion because of the mentoring. One of the things that is happening is we are recommending them to do as much as possible of developing the feedback using more real life exercises application, because the three areas are very hands-on. So there is no data science without data. You need to have the data, work with the data, and the theory most of the time is quite different from the reality, because you envision some form of data that is not there. And the same thing for AI. So you need first to have a vision, then you develop the algorithm, then you develop the code, and you have the model. So we are advising them on those aspects. So in particular, modeling and simulation is a part of data science. When you do, all the algorithms, decision trees is a form of modeling anyway. So it will be there.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I definitely, just having the high level knowledge of the different areas is a great first step and really important. But I agree, and hopefully if you're having discussions with DAU, my personal opinion, hopefully that can lead to some more in-depth courses and options for those that want to pursue it. Obviously, not everybody needs to have that level of expertise, and a lot of people, taking the DAU courses are going to be program managers or maybe higher level. But I think it'll help the defense workforce as a whole to have those kind of mixed experiences.
Good reinforcement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, DAU is realizing that there is not a single category for all the possible users of this education. So, and we are addressing that. Even if some of the competencies can be in common, but then the ability within each one can be different, and the depth of the knowledge can be different. So this was part of our recommendations, actually.
Definitely, yeah. Awesome. Well, we have quite a few attendees. If you have any questions, we have a few more minutes here. If anybody has questions on the topic or the presentation, feel free to type those in. We'll get those answered for you.
So one thing that I want to add is the fact that we are working in an academic environment, and the scale of the education that we can provide is big but not huge. So we can have cohorts that can be a few hundreds. But the scale for DAU, it's really big, and the geographical distribution of the users is pretty wide. So the kind of problems that DAU, David Pearson in particular, is having is something that for us it's interesting to watch, to be there, and eventually to help them. But it's also useful for us, because it's scaling up an education program in a way that there are not many cases like that available. So using sources like Coursera in a structured way, monitoring the progress there are many challenges from the didactic standpoint. So we are happy that we are doing this experience, and we are helping DAU on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure they're happy you're on board. Me as somebody who takes DAU, I'm glad smart people like you guys are helping design their curriculum. And as you said, it is pretty amazing. DAU, the swath, and the diversity. You know, they have all the different services. So anything from Army to Navy to Air Force, Space Force, Marines, and then they're providing the education for projects that range from ground, space, air, hundreds of thousands of dollars all the way to billions. So yeah, it's a wide
Yep.
sphere, and there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of opportunities for us to learn from higher institutions.
It was a great experience for us. It is a great experience.
Yes.
Good to hear. Well, it looks like there's not questions. So we'll go ahead and close up the session. This is the last session for the Human Capital Development track. And again, I appreciate the great presentation and the work that you have done, Mr. Giffin and Dr. Lipizzi, on this project. And if you want to switch over, there's one last session. Dr. Verma is going to be giving the closing remarks along with Mr. Tom McDermott for the conference. So this concludes the Human Capital Development track. Thanks everyone for your attention.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everybody.
You too. Thank you.